Turn the car around, now. My husband's voice was a sharp whisper, a sliver of ice in the warm, sun-drenched car. We were less than a mile from my parents' house, heading to the annual family reunion I'd been looking forward to for months. I glanced around. The road was empty, flanked by the same dense woods I'd known my whole life. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I didn't see anything wrong, nothing out of the ordinary, but the look on his face, a mask of pale, cold dread made my blood run cold. I didn't understand. I didn't ask why. I just trusted him. And that split-second decision, that blind trust in his fear, didn't just save our lives. It shattered my entire world and exposed a horrifying secret my own parents were hiding in plain sight. Every family has its traditions. Ours was the big summer reunion at my parents' sprawling estate, deep in the countryside. To any outsider, it looked idyllic. A grand old house with a wraparound porch, acres of lawn that bled into untamed forest, and the sound of laughter echoing from the pool. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, were the architects of this perfect world. They were pillars of their community, rich, respected, and impossibly charming. He was a self-made man, famous for his shrewd business deals. She was the perfect hostess, a woman who made everyone feel like the most important person in the room. They built an image of flawless, old money grace, and their home was the stage for that performance. For most of my life, I believed in the act. I thought the reunions were a symbol of how close we were, a testament to the family bonds my parents claimed to hold so sacred. But after I married Liam, I started to see the cracks in the facade. Liam wasn't from our world. He was a high school history teacher, a man whose wealth was in knowledge and kindness, not stocks. My parents were polite about him, of course. They were always polite, but their approval was cold. I'd catch my father watching Liam with a look of detached analysis, like he was trying to solve a boring puzzle. My mother would offer backhanded compliments, praising his simple lifestyle in a way that made it sound like a disease she hoped he'd get over. For about 6 months before that summer, our marriage had been under a quiet strain. Nothing dramatic, just the slow death by 1,000 cuts that comes from outside pressure. My parents' subtle disapproval had wormed its way into our life, creating little pockets of resentment. Liam felt, and he was right, that he was constantly being judged and coming up short. I felt, and I was wrong, that he wasn't trying hard enough to fit into a world he wanted no part of. We were just drifting. This reunion, I hoped, would be a reset, a chance for me to reconnect with my family, and maybe a chance for them to finally see the good, honest man I married. I was so naive. The drive to their house is a long one, almost 3 hours from the city. The further you go, the more civilization just peels away. Skyscrapers become suburbs, then farmland, then finally the dense, imposing forests of my childhood. Cell service becomes a ghost, dropping out for miles at a time. My mother always said it was part of the charm, a chance to truly disconnect. Looking back, I see it for what it was: isolation, deliberate vulnerability. We were making good time, the sun warming my arm through the open window. We talked about little things. My cousin Sarah's new baby, who we'd be meeting. The 30-year debate over whether Aunt Carol's potato salad was actually edible. Liam was quieter than usual, but I figured he was just bracing himself for the weekend. He was staring out the passenger window, his jaw tight. I reached over and put my hand on his knee. He flinched, a tiny reaction, so small I almost talked myself out of seeing it. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my voice light. He forced a smile that didn't come anywhere near his eyes. "Yeah, fine, just thinking." But he wasn't just thinking, he was scanning. His eyes weren't enjoying the scenery. They were searching it, sweeping back and forth from the road to the tree line with a quiet intensity that was starting to make my skin crawl. I tried to brush it off. It was my own anxiety. I told myself everything was fine. We were almost there. Soon we'd pull into the long gravel driveway, and the familiar smell of my mother's hydrangeas and my father's cigars would make all this unease disappear. The last part of the drive is a narrow state route, a ribbon of cracked asphalt that winds through the thickest part of the woods. This was always where the feeling of being watched started. The trees are so tall and thick they form a tunnel, plunging the road into twilight even on the brightest day. It's the kind of place where secrets can hide in the shadows. About 5 miles from the turnoff to my parents' private road, we passed a car. It was a beat-up, dark green sedan, probably from the 90s, pulled over on the grassy shoulder. It was half hidden by overgrown bushes, like someone had tried to tuck it away. There's nothing strange about a broken-down car, but this one just felt wrong. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, but the tires were clean, like it had just been driven there. There was no one around, no note on the windshield, just an empty, silent car on the edge of the woods. "That's weird," I murmured, mostly to myself. Liam didn't answer. He had twisted in his seat to watch the car in the rearview mirror until it was gone. His face had gone from tense to rigid. He pulled out his phone, saw no service, and swore under his breath, a sharp, angry sound that made me jump. "Liam, what is it?" I asked, my unease finally turning into real concern. "It's just a car." "I know that car, Clara," he said, his voice low and tight. "I've seen it before." I waited for him to say more, but he just shook his head, lost in some calculation he wasn't sharing. He was connecting dots I couldn't even see. I felt that old frustration bubble up. Why couldn't he just talk to me? Why did he have to be so guarded, especially here, in my home? We passed the last landmark before the turn, a huge gnarled oak tree that had been split by lightning decades ago. That was our family's unofficial waypoint. The lightning scar was a dark, jagged wound in the old wood. My parents' private road was less than 100 yards away. It's a long, unpaved lane, a full mile of gravel and dirt that cuts even deeper into the forest, completely hidden from the main road. Once you make that turn, you're on their land. You're in their world. I slowed the car down, flicking on the turn signal out of habit. The entrance to the road was marked by 2 big stone pillars, with a wrought iron gate swung open in welcome. The perfect picture of a sanctuary. As we started to drift toward the entrance, I could already hear it in my head, my nieces and nephews shrieking with laughter, the sizzle of the grill, the clinking of ice and glasses. Safety, family, home. And that's when Liam's hand shot out and gripped my arm. It wasn't gentle. His fingers dug into my skin, his grip so desperate it was almost painful. I gasped and looked at him. His face was completely drained of color. He was a waxy, terrifying white, his eyes wide with a terror so deep it seemed to hollow him out. His lips were trembling as he leaned toward my ear. And then he said the words that changed everything. "Turn the car around, now." The whisper was brittle, sharp, and laced with pure panic. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command that came from somewhere primal. My foot hovered over the brake, my mind trying to make sense of the order. Turn around? We were here. My mother had probably already set my place at the table. "What?" I stammered. "Liam, what are you talking about? We're here." "Clara, please," he begged, his eyes darting from the rearview mirror to the woods, then back to my face. His knuckles were white where he gripped my arm. "Don't ask questions. Please, just trust me. For once, trust me. Turn the car around and drive." The plea in his voice was so raw. It was the sound of a man dangling over a cliff. All the petty frustrations, all the months of silent tension, it all just evaporated. Every rational thought in my head screamed at me to pull over, to talk this through, to demand an explanation for this insane behavior. My family, my loving parents, my perfect childhood home were just down that road. Turning back would be a huge insult. It would cause a scene, a rift that might never heal. It was rude. It was crazy. It was unthinkable. But the look in my husband's eyes was more powerful than any of that. It was a primal fear, an animal certainty that we were walking toward danger. In that split second, I had to choose. I had to choose between the carefully constructed reality my parents had built for me and the terrified man sitting beside me, the man I had promised to love, the man whose hand was trembling in mine. I chose him. My foot didn't hit the brake. It slammed on the gas. I wrenched the steering wheel hard to the left, the tires screaming as I made a sloppy, frantic U-turn. Gravel sprayed against the car like gunshots. I didn't care. I straightened out and floored it, heading back the way we came, away from the stone pillars, away from the lightning-scarred oak, away from my home. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was driving on his adrenaline, a passenger in my own body. The reunion, the family reset, all of it was shrinking in the rearview mirror, replaced by the dark, shadowy trees that now looked less like a forest and more like a cage. We drove in total silence for the first 10 minutes. The only sound was the engine and my own ragged breathing. I didn't look at Liam. I just kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my fingers ached. I drove way too fast, just trying to put distance between us and that turn off. I felt like I was being chased, even though the road behind us was completely empty. Then, my phone chirped. We must have hit a pocket of service. Then it chirped again, and again. A call from my mother. I ignored it. A text appeared. "Where are you?" Getting worried. A moment later, my father called. I let it ring. Another text from my sister. "Mom's starting to freak out. Is everything okay? Call me." The phone buzzed again and again. It was a digital assault. The tone of the messages started to curdle from concern to annoyance, then to sharp, parental anger. "Clara, this isn't funny. Your father is very disappointed. Pick up the phone right now. What is the meaning of this disrespect?" Each message felt like a punch to the gut. I felt a wave of guilt and shame. What had I done? I'd just abandoned my family because my husband had some kind of panic attack. They had every right to be angry. I glanced at Liam. He was still staring into the side mirror, his face a grim, stony mask. "You have to tell me what's going on," I said, my voice shaking. "Liam, I'm serious. I just blew up my family for you. You owe me an explanation." He finally turned to me, his eyes dark with a certainty that chilled me to the bone. "Their disappointment is better than us being dead, Clara." Dead. The word just hung in the air. It was so dramatic, so final. "That broken down car," he began, his voice low and steady, the panic gone and replaced by a cold focus. I recognized it. "It belongs to a man named Arthur Vance. Your father had a business falling out with him about a year ago. A really nasty one." I vaguely remembered the name. My father had mentioned him, called him a disgruntled contractor who was making trouble. "So?" I asked. "He disappeared a few months ago," Liam said. "Vanished. His family filed a missing persons report. And that car, Clara? Your father described it to me once. He was laughing about it. Said Arthur loved that piece of junk more than his own wife." The pieces were starting to click into place, forming a picture I did not want to see. The isolated property, the car of a missing man, hidden near the entrance, my father's hatred for him. "And there's more," Liam continued. "Your dad called me last week, asked me to look over some of his business ledgers. He said he wanted my fresh eyes on things, but the numbers didn't make any sense, Clara. There were huge sums of money moving through shell corporations, loans with insane interest rates. It looked like a loan sharking operation, a very serious one." My stomach turned. Loan sharking? My father? The respected community leader? It was impossible. When I tried to ask him about it, Liam said, he got cold. Told me it was complex business and I wouldn't understand. He told me to forget what I saw and to just come enjoy the reunion. His voice dropped. It wasn't an invitation, Clara. It felt like a threat. We kept driving. the beautiful countryside now looking sinister. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. An hour later, we pulled into the parking lot of a brightly lit diner. It felt like a sanctuary of fluorescent lit normalcy. As we sat in the car, the engine ticking, I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something dark. I thought the most dangerous thing that day was a secret, but the truth was so much worse. If you want to know what was really waiting for us down that gravel road, make sure you subscribe. Because the trap my parents set wasn't for us, and discovering that secret would change our lives forever. Inside the diner, we slid into a cracked vinyl booth. Liam immediately pulled out his phone. He didn't call the local police. He knew better. My father's influence ran deep in that county. The sheriff was a close family friend who came to their house for Christmas. Instead, Liam called a friend from college, Mark, now a detective 3 states away. He spoke in low, urgent tones, laying it all out. The ledgers, Arthur Vance. The car, the overwhelming feeling that we were walking into a trap. I just sat there, stirring my cold coffee, my world tilting on its axis. I was clinging to denial. "This is crazy," I whispered to Liam after he hung up. "My parents are not criminals. My father can be ruthless. I know that. But he's not a monster. There has to be another explanation." Liam looked at me, his face a mix of pity and resolve. "Clara, what's the one place on the property you were never allowed to go?" I knew it instantly. The old cabin. It was a rundown shack deep in the woods on the far side of the lake, miles from the main house. We were always told it was structurally unsound, dangerous, and strictly off limits. My father kept it padlocked. "He mentioned it on the phone last week," Liam said. "He said he was finally having it torn down after the reunion. Said it was time to clear out the old mess." Clear out the old mess. Liam's theory was horrifyingly simple. Arthur Vance must have been threatening to expose my father's illegal business. My parents, desperate to protect their perfect reputation, lured him to their isolated property. The reunion, with dozens of family members there, was the perfect alibi. Who would suspect a thing in the middle of a wholesome family party? "They weren't setting a trap for us, Clara," Liam explained gently. "We were the camouflage. Your whole family's presence was the cover story. They were going to deal with Arthur Vance in that old cabin, and we would all be their annoying alibis, laughing and swimming while something horrific happened just over the hill. And us? Why the sudden, overwhelming fear?" Liam guessed they were getting paranoid. They thought that because he'd seen the ledgers, he might know too much. Maybe they planned to intimidate him. Or maybe his gut was just screaming that we were about to walk into a house with people capable of murder. We weren't the targets. We were just collateral damage, our lives ruined by what we might see, our silence bought with family loyalty and fear. The entire reunion was a stage, set for a monstrous crime. Just as I was trying to absorb the weight of his words, Liam's phone rang. It was his detective friend Mark. Liam put it on speaker. "Liam, listen." Mark's voice was grim. "You and your wife need to stay exactly where you are. Do not go back there. Do you understand?" "What is it? What happened?" Liam asked. There was a pause. "There was an incident at your father-in-law's property about 45 minutes ago. An explosion. Dispatch got a call about a fire. They're saying it was a propane tank leak in an old outbuilding. A cabin." The air left my lungs. The old cabin. "The building was completely destroyed," Mark continued. "The fire is spreading. It's a mess. The official story is already taking shape. A tragic accident." "Was anyone hurt?" Liam asked, though I think he already knew the answer. "They've found remains," Mark said, his voice dropping. "Too early for an ID. But the sheriff is already floating the theory that a vagrant might have been squatting in there. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. A vagrant. A convenient, anonymous body to explain away the ashes of Arthur Vance. My parents would be the victims of a tragic accident on their property, Their performance of grief would be flawless, and their secret would be buried forever. We would have been there. We would have heard the explosion, seen the smoke. We would have been woven into their lie, forced to back up a story we knew was false, trapped by love and fear. The deadly trap wasn't a gun to our heads. It was a cage for our souls. I started to cry, silent tears falling into my cold coffee. It was all true. My father, the man who taught me to ride a bike. My mother, the woman who sang me to sleep. They were monsters, hiding behind a mask of kindness. My entire life had been a lie, a beautifully decorated lie. We never went back. We never spoke to my parents again. Liam's friend Mark advised us to disappear for a while. He said that people with my parents' money and influence don't leave loose ends. The official investigation into the accidental fire was closed within a week. The human remains were never identified. Arthur Vance was still just a missing person. Case closed. For me, the case was blown wide open. I started replaying my entire life through this new horrifying filter. The family friends who'd suddenly moved away after a disagreement with my father. The hushed, angry phone calls I'd sometimes hear from his study. My mother's steely composure and her ability to destroy someone with a polite smile. The evidence of their ruthlessness was there all along. I had just been trained not to see it. The biggest change, though, was between me and Liam. Whatever distance had been growing between us, it vanished that day on that lonely road. In that moment of pure terror, he didn't try to argue with me or use logic. He just showed me his fear and asked me to trust him. And I did. That one act of faith, of choosing him over the life I'd always known, saved us in more ways than one. It didn't just save us from being tied to a horrific crime. It saved us. It forged a bond of trust so strong that it became the new foundation for our lives. We built a new life, far away from the gilded cage of my childhood. A life based not on appearances, but on a quiet, hard-won truth. I think a lot about instinct now, about that alarm bell in your gut that we're so often taught to ignore. We're told to be polite, to not make a scene, but sometimes the most rational thing you can do is listen to that whisper of fear. That split-second decision didn't just save our lives, it gave us a real one.